You're who?
I can explain.
Explain what, that you've been lying?
I never lied to you.
The wine glass shattered against the hardwood floor at precisely 11:47 p.m., sending Merlot splashing across Miriam's bare feet like crimson accusations. You're who? Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but Hyunwoo flinched as though she'd screamed. He stood in her doorway, she supposed, still wearing that perfectly tailored Brioni suit he'd left in that morning, his tie loosened just enough to reveal the hollow of his throat. The same throat she'd kissed 3 hours ago in his room. The same man she'd sworn she was falling for. The same man whose face now stared back at her from her phone screen, above a Forbes headline, Kim Hyunwoo, heir to Daehan Group Empire, spotted in London, shareholders demand his return to Seoul. I can explain, he said, his accent thickening the way it always did when he was nervous. Miriam, please. Explain? She laughed, a brittle sound that surprised even her. Explain what exactly? That for the past 2 months you've been lying to me? That while I've been worrying about making rent you're worth? She glanced at her phone, her stomach churning. $7 billion? I never lied to you. You told me you were a student. That you were here doing research on. She pressed her fingers to her temples, her silver bracelet. The one he'd given her last week, the one she'd thought was costume jewelry, catching the light. Now she wondered. Now she wondered about everything. What was it? Social economics. That part was true. He took a step forward and she took one back. The hurt that flashed across his face was so genuine it almost made her relent. Almost. I am researching. I wanted to understand how people really live without the bubble, without the billions? The silence between them stretched taut. Outside, London rain began to patter against the windows of her modest Brixton flat. The flat she'd inherited from her parents, the last piece of them she had left. The flat she'd been forced to share because a social worker's salary couldn't cover the mortgage and bills. The flat where this beautiful, infuriating man had walked into her life 10 weeks ago and turned everything upside down. I need you to leave, she said quietly. Miriam? Not the apartment. Just give me space, please. He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. Then he nodded once, grabbed his jacket from the coat rack, and walked out into the rainy London night. It wasn't until she heard the front door click shut that Miriam allowed herself to sink to the floor, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach, to the secret she'd discovered just that morning. The secret she'd been planning to tell him tonight over wine and takeaway curry. The secret that changed everything. She was 8 weeks pregnant with a billionaire's baby, and he didn't even know. Andrea, this is insane. I can't just let a stranger live in Mum and Dad's room. Miriam stood in the doorway of what had been her parents' bedroom, the space now stripped bare except for the mahogany furniture too precious to sell. Afternoon light filtered through the lace curtains her mother had hung 20 years ago, creating patterns on the floorboards her father had refinished the summer before the accident. Andrea bounced on the freshly made bed, her braids swinging. It's been 3 years, babe. They'd want you to stay in this flat, not lose it because you're too proud to get help. I'm not proud, I'm just... Miriam slumped against the doorframe. What if they're a murderer? Then we'll murder them back. Andrea grinned. Look, you've already posted the ad. Let's just see who responds. You said you wanted a female tenant anyway, right? Some nice quiet girl who works in the city and is never home. Miriam's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. New response to your rental listing. Her heart did an uncomfortable flip. Someone already replied. See? Universe providing. Andrea bounded over, trying to peek at the screen. What do they say? Miriam scrolled through the message. It's actually quite nice. Professional. Says they're looking for a quiet place, respectful of boundaries, can pay 3 months up front. She paused. They've attached references. They? So not a girl? Doesn't specify. Miriam chewed her bottom lip. She couldn't afford to be picky. The mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks, and after covering the broken boiler last month, her savings were decimated. Should I respond? Obviously. Set up a viewing. Do it now before someone else snatches them up. That evening, Miriam found herself tidying the flat for the 3rd time, plumping cushions that didn't need plumping, reorganizing books that were already organized. The social services office had been particularly brutal today, 3 emergency cases, 2 home visits that ran over, and Mrs. Patterson's dementia had worsened to the point they'd needed to arrange emergency care. She'd come home exhausted, wanting nothing more than a bath and Netflix. Instead, she was about to interview a stranger to share her sanctuary. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 p.m. Miriam checked her reflection in the hallway mirror one last time, smoothing down her navy jumper. Primark, 2 seasons old but still respectable. She took a breath, fixed her smile and opened the door. Her prepared greeting died in her throat. The man standing in her doorway looked like he'd stepped out of a Korean drama. Tall, easily 6 feet, with the kind of bone structure that made Renaissance sculptors weep. His black hair was styled in that effortlessly perfect way that probably took 30 minutes and expensive products. He wore simple clothes, dark jeans, a white button-down, a gray wool coat. But even Miriam's untrained eye could tell they weren't high-street brands. Miss Cornwall? His English was excellent, touched with a British accent she couldn't quite place. I'm Hyunwoo Kim. We corresponded about the room? Ah yes. Yes of course. Come in. She stepped back, suddenly hyper-aware of the scuff marks on the wall she kept meaning to paint over, the slightly worn sofa, her father's old bookshelf with its mismatched volumes. If Hyunwoo noticed any of it, his face didn't show it. He removed his shoes without being asked, a small gesture that made something in Miriam's chest ease slightly, and followed her into the living room. Would you like tea? Coffee? Tea would be lovely, thank you. She escaped to the kitchen, using the time to gather herself. He's just a tenant, she told herself firmly. A potential tenant. Who happens to look like he should be on magazine covers rather than responding to your sad little rental ad. When she returned with 2 mugs, her mother's good china because apparently she was trying to impress him, Hyunwoo was standing by the bookshelf, examining the spines with genuine interest. Your parents were readers, he observed. It wasn't a question. Miriam's hands tightened around the mugs. How did you? Different editions, different genres, but consistent purchases up until about 3 years ago. Then nothing. He turned and his expression was kind. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed. No, it's your right. She handed him a mug, sank into her father's armchair. Car accident. 3 years ago last month. That must be incredibly difficult. The words were simple, but something in his tone, a genuine understanding, not the platitude she usually received, made her look at him more carefully. There was a sadness in his dark eyes that she recognized. The sadness of someone who understood loss. You said you were a student? She asked, redirecting. The references you sent were from professors at LSE? Yes. I'm doing postgraduate research in social economics. He settled on the sofa, cradling his tea with both hands. Specifically, I'm interested in how economic disparity affects community structures in urban environments. That's specific. He smiled, and the expression transformed his face from handsome to devastating. I like to be thorough. They talked for an hour. He answered all her questions smoothly. His previous accommodations hadn't worked out, too loud. He needed somewhere quiet to work on his thesis. He didn't party, didn't smoke, was generally tidy. He asked thoughtful questions about the neighborhood, the flat, her preferred arrangement for shared spaces. He never once made her feel like he was judging her shabby furniture or the crack in the ceiling she couldn't afford to fix. I should mention, Miriam said, gathering courage, the ad specified I was hoping for a female tenant. Ah. Hyunwoo set down his empty mug. I understand. I can provide additional references if that would help. Or we could arrange a trial period. 1 month, and if you're uncomfortable, I'll find somewhere else. No hard feelings. It was more than fair. More than she'd expected. And yet something made her hesitate, not fear but awareness. An awareness that this man, this stranger, was going to change her life. She just didn't know how yet. When would you want to move in? His eyes lit up. Is this weekend too soon? Hyunwoo moved in on Saturday with a single suitcase and a laptop bag. That's it? Miriam asked, staring at his meager belongings. That's everything you own? I believe in traveling light. He smiled that devastating smile again. Possessions are just things, aren't they? If only she'd known then how ironic those words would become. The first week was awkward in the way cohabitation with strangers always is, learning each other's schedules, navigating the bathroom situation, figuring out the unspoken rules of shared spaces. But Hyunwoo was an ideal tenant. Quiet, clean, respectful. He worked odd hours, often staying up late at the kitchen table with his laptop and a mountain of research papers. Miriam would come home from work exhausted, and he'd already have tidied the living room. Sometimes there would be food. I made too much, would you like some? Always Korean dishes she'd never tried but found delicious. This is incredible, she said one evening, savoring what he called bulgogi. Where did you learn to cook like this? Something flickered across his face. My mother taught me. Before he paused. Before she got sick. I'm sorry. Don't be. She'd be happy to know her recipes are feeding someone new. He topped up her water glass. Tell me about your work? You mentioned you're a social worker? And just like that they started talking. Really talking. Miriam found herself telling him about the families she worked with, the impossible situations, the wins that felt like miracles. He listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed he was really hearing her, not just waiting for his turn to speak. In turn, he shared stories from his research, observations about London that made her laugh or see her city through new eyes. He never talked about his life before London, and she didn't push. Everyone had their secrets. Andrea noticed the change immediately. "You're glowing," she announced, appearing at Miriam's desk during lunch break with coffee and suspicious eyes. "It's the tenant, isn't it? The hot Korean guy. His name is Hyun-woo, and don't be ridiculous." "Babe, I know that look. You like him. I barely know him. You know his favorite tea, how he takes his coffee, that he stays up until 2 a.m. working, and that he does this thing where he runs his hand through his hair when he's concentrating." Andrea counted off on her fingers. "You've mentioned him exactly 12 times since he moved in 3 weeks ago." "That's not, I haven't." Miriam buried her face in her hands. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to anyone with eyes and a functioning brain." Andrea's expression softened. "There's nothing wrong with it, you know. You're both single adults. When's the last time you even went on a date?" "That's not the point. He's my tenant. It would be wildly inappropriate." "What? You're not his landlord, you're his flatmate. There's a difference." "Andrea, I'm just saying life is short. Your parents would want you to be happy." The words sat heavy in Miriam's chest for the rest of the day. That evening, she came home to find Hyun-woo in the kitchen, swearing softly in Korean at a pot of boiling water. "Everything okay?" He looked up and her breath caught. He'd changed from his usual button-downs into a simple black t-shirt, and she could see the lean muscle of his arms, the elegant lines of his collarbones. His hair was damp like he'd just showered. "I'm attempting jjigae," he said ruefully. "It's not going well. Can I help?" "Can you cook?" "I can chop things and follow instructions." His smile was warm. "Then you're hired." They worked side by side, falling into an easy rhythm. He taught her how to prepare the ingredients, explaining the significance of each component. She told him about Mrs. Patterson, about the small victory of finding her a care home that allowed her to bring her cat. "You care deeply," Hyun-woo observed, watching her chop vegetables. "About your work, about the people. Is that a bad thing?" "It's rare. And precious." He reached past her for the soy sauce, and for a moment they were close enough that she could smell his shampoo, something expensive and cedar-scented. "The world needs more people like you. I just do what anyone would do." "No." His voice was serious. "You don't. Most people see problems as inconveniences. You see people as worth saving." The intensity of his gaze made her look away, her cheeks warming. "You're going to make me insufferable with all these compliments." "Impossible. You're too genuine for that." They ate dinner on the sofa, watching a terrible reality show and laughing at the contestants' dramatic declarations. Hyun-woo's laugh was infectious, bright and unguarded. She wanted to hear it. "This is nice," she said without thinking. "It is." He shifted slightly closer. "I haven't felt this comfortable in a long time." "No. No." He hesitated, then, "I left home to get away from expectations. From people who wanted things from me. Here I can just be me." "I get that," Miriam said softly. "After my parents died, everyone wanted me to grieve in specific ways, move on according to their timeline. Like there's a manual for loss. There isn't." "No." She looked at him, at the understanding in his eyes. "There really isn't." He reached over and took her hand. Just that, a simple touch, his fingers threading through hers. But Miriam felt it everywhere, a current of electricity that made her entire body aware of him. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me stay here. For making this feel like home." She should pull away. Should establish boundaries. Should remember all the reasons why this was complicated. Instead, she squeezed his hand back. "Thank you for being here." They stayed like that, hands clasped, until the episode ended. When Hyun-woo finally let go to take their dishes to the kitchen, Miriam's hand felt cold, like it was missing something essential. That night, lying in bed, she admitted the truth to herself. She was falling for her tenant. The man with the sad eyes and beautiful smile, who cooked her dinner and listened to her work stories, who seemed to understand her in ways no one had since her parents died. She just wished she knew why that terrified her so much. 6 weeks into Hyun-woo's tenancy, Miriam realized she was in trouble. It wasn't just that he was handsome, though he was devastatingly so. It wasn't even the small kindnesses, how he always made sure there was milk for her morning tea, or the way he'd leave encouraging notes on her work bag before difficult days. It was the way he looked at her. Like she was precious. Like she mattered. "You're staring at him again," Andrea whispered during their Friday night drinks at the pub. Miriam jerked her attention back to her friend. "I wasn't. Babe. He just walked in and your entire face lit up like Christmas." Miriam risked a glance toward the entrance. Hyunwoo had indeed just arrived, scanning the crowd until his eyes found hers. His smile was instant, warm, meant only for her. He navigated through the Friday crowd with natural grace, despite the press of bodies. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sliding into the seat beside Miriam, not across from her, beside her, close enough that their thighs touched. The library lost track of time. "Hyunwoo, this is Andrea. Andrea, my flatmate Hyunwoo. The famous Andrea." Hyunwoo extended his hand. "I've heard so much about you." "Funny," Andrea said, shaking it with an evaluating look. "I've heard quite a bit about you too." Miriam wanted to die. The evening progressed with Andrea in full interrogation mode, asking Hyunwoo questions that made Miriam want to sink through the floor. He handled it with grace and humor, never seeming offended by Andrea's protective bluntness. "So," Andrea said 3 drinks in, "what are your intentions toward my best friend?" "Andrea." "What?" "It's a valid question." She fixed Hyunwoo with a stern look. "Well?" Hyunwoo was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke he was looking at Miriam. "I intend to be worthy of her friendship. And anything else she might be willing to give me." The air between them crackled. "Oh my God," Andrea said gleefully. "This is happening. This is actually happening." "I need another drink," Miriam announced, fleeing to the bar. Hyunwoo followed her. Of course he did. "I'm sorry if that was too forward," he said quietly, standing close in the crowded space. "But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this." "Feel what?" Her voice came out breathier than intended. "This." He gestured between them. "You. Whatever this is." "Hyunwoo. I know it's complicated. I know I'm your tenant, that there are boundaries. But Miriam," he cupped her face with one hand, so gentle. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the day we met. We lived together. It could ruin everything. Or it could be everything." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I'm not saying we rush into anything. But I'd like permission to take you on a proper date. To court you the way you deserve." "Court me?" She couldn't help laughing. "Who says that?" "I do, apparently. When I'm nervous and trying not to mess this up." His smile was self-deprecating. "Is it working?" "God help her." "Yes." "So that's a yes to the date?" "One date," she agreed, her heart hammering. "We'll see." His smile could have powered all of London. "One date. I'll make it count." He kept his word. That Saturday he refused to tell her where they were going, only that she should dress warm. He showed up at her bedroom door in dark jeans and a charcoal peacoat that probably cost more than her monthly salary, looking like a model and completely unfair. "You look beautiful," he said, taking in her burgundy dress and wool coat. "You clean up okay yourself." They took the tube to South Bank, walking along the Thames as the sun set, turning the water gold. Hyunwoo bought them roasted chestnuts from a street vendor, and they walked hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. He took her to a small Korean restaurant tucked down a side street, the kind of place you'd never find unless you knew about it. The owner greeted Hyunwoo in Korean, a rapid exchange that made both men laugh. "You're a regular?" Miriam asked as they settled into a corner booth. "I found this place my first week in London. It reminded me of home." He ordered for them both, checking if she had any dietary restrictions. "Is that okay? If you want something else." "I trust you." The words seemed to mean more than they should. His eyes held hers for a long moment before he smiled. "Then I'll make sure you're not disappointed." The food was incredible, dishes she'd never tried, flavors that exploded on her tongue. Hyunwoo watched her reactions with obvious delight, explaining each dish's significance, telling stories about growing up in Seoul. "You must miss it," she said. "You're home." "Sometimes." He poured them both tea. "But I don't miss the person I had to be there." "What do you mean?" He was quiet for a long moment. "In Korea there are expectations. For who you should be, what you should want, how you should live. I came here to find out who I am without all that weight." "And? Have you figured it out?" "I'm starting to." He reached across the table, lacing his fingers through hers. "I know I'm happier here than I've been in years. I know a large part of that is you." "Hyunwoo. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," he said quickly. "I just want you to know that this, whatever this is between us, it's real for me. You're real for me." Miriam's chest felt too full. "It's real for me too. That's what scares me." "Why?" "Because I've already lost so much. My parents, my stability, my certainty about the future. And you," she struggled for words. "You feel like something precious. Something I could lose. Or something you could keep." His thumb traced patterns on her palm. "Not everything good has to end in loss, Miriam." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. After dinner, they walked along the South Bank, the city lights reflecting off the Thames like fallen stars. Street performers played music, couples strolled past, and London hummed with life around them. "Thank you," Miriam said. "For tonight. For everything. It's not over yet." Hyunwoo glanced at his watch. "We're right on time." "On time for what?" He just smiled and led her to the London Eye. She tried to protest. "Those tickets are expensive." But he'd already purchased them, and soon they were in a capsule, rising above the city. London spread out below them in a carpet of lights, the Thames a dark ribbon cutting through the glow. Miriam pressed against the glass, marveling at the view. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Yes," Hyunwoo agreed. But when she glanced at him, he was watching her, not the view. The capsule reached its peak, and the city stretched endlessly in all directions. Hyunwoo moved behind her, his arms coming around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Miriam," he murmured against her hair. "May I kiss you?" She turned in his arms, her answer written in her eyes. His kiss was gentle at first, questioning. But when she responded, threading her fingers through his hair, pulling him closer, it deepened into something that made her knees weak. He kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the capsule was descending. "So," Hyunwoo said, slightly dazed. "Does this mean there'll be a second date?" Miriam laughed, kissing him again. "I think we can arrange that." The next 8 weeks were the happiest of Miriam's life. They navigated their new reality with care. Hyunwoo still slept in his room. They were careful about PDA around the flat, maintaining some boundaries even as the walls between them crumbled in other ways. He cooked her dinner. She helped with his research. They spent evenings tangled together on the sofa, talking until midnight. He walked her home from the tube station on late nights, kissed her breathless in the doorway, then retreated to his room with a rueful smile. "I'm trying to be a gentleman," he'd say. "What if I don't want you to be a gentleman? Then you're making this very difficult for me." But it felt right taking things slow. Building something real. Andrea approved. "He's good for you. I haven't seen you this happy since before your parents died." Miriam knew she was right. Hyunwoo had somehow slipped past all her defenses, had made himself essential to her life. She woke up thinking of him, fell asleep to the sound of his voice, felt his absence like a missing limb when he was gone. It terrified her. It exhilarated her. One evening she came home to find their living room transformed. Candles everywhere, rose petals scattered on the floor, soft music playing. "What is all this?" she breathed. Hyunwoo emerged from the kitchen wearing a button-down and slacks, and an apron. "It's been 2 months since our first date. I wanted to celebrate." "You remembered?" "I remember everything about you." He pulled out her chair. "Please sit." He'd cooked a full Korean meal, dishes she'd come to love over their time together. They ate by candlelight, talking and laughing, the intimacy of the setting making everything feel heightened, significant. After dinner, they slow danced in the living room to jazz music, Miriam's head on his chest, his arms around her waist. "I need to tell you something," he murmured into her hair. "What?" "I'm falling in love with you." Her heart stopped. Started again harder. "Hyunwoo. You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." He pulled back enough to cup her face. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in longer than I can remember. You make me want to be better. To deserve you." "You already deserve me," she said fiercely. "And I'm falling for you too. Have been for weeks." He kissed her then, deep and searching, and something shifted. This wasn't the careful restraint of before. This was hunger, urgency, need. "Miriam," he breathed against her lips. I don't want to rush." "I know." She pulled back, looking into his eyes. "But I'm ready. If you are." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He swept her up in his arms, actually swept her, like something from a romance novel, and carried her to his room. They tumbled onto his bed together, hands exploring, barriers falling away. He made love to her slowly, reverently, like she was something sacred. And afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, Miriam thought she'd never felt so completely safe. "Stay," he murmured, half asleep. "Don't go back to your room." "Where else would I go?" She kissed his chest. "This is where I belong. Always. Always." She meant it. God help her, she meant it. 3 weeks later, Miriam stood in her bathroom, staring at 3 positive pregnancy tests. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." But the evidence was irrefutable. The nausea she'd attributed to stress, the fatigue, the missed period, it all made sense now. She was pregnant with Hyunwoo's baby. They'd been careful. She was on birth control. But apparently life had other plans. "Miriam?" Hyunwoo's voice came from outside the bathroom. Are you all right? She shoved the tests into the bathroom cabinet, splashed cold water on her face. Fine. Just getting ready for work. She couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not until she'd processed this herself, figured out what it meant, what she wanted. Except she never got the chance. That evening, Andrea burst into the flat without knocking, phone in hand and fury in her eyes. Tell me this isn't true, she demanded, shoving the phone at Miriam. It was a gossip site, the kind Miriam never read. But there, in high-definition color, was a photo of Hyun-woo at what looked like a corporate event. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than her car, stood next to an older man who shared his features. The headline read, Kim Hyun-woo Daehan Group heir, maintains low profile in London, father expects return to Seoul by year's end. The article went on to detail his family's business empire, their net worth, his status as one of Korea's most eligible bachelors. There were photos of him at charity galas, business meetings, shaking hands with politicians. Miriam read it twice, her blood turning to ice. You're dating a billionaire, Andrea said flatly. And he didn't think to mention it? Miriam couldn't form words. Her brain had short-circuited. Did you know? Of course I didn't know. Then you need to talk to him. Now. Andrea's expression softened slightly. Babe, I'm worried about you. This is big. Really big. Miriam nodded numbly. Andrea left, and Miriam sat alone in the gathering darkness, questions spiraling through her mind. Had everything been a lie? Was this all some kind of game to him? Why hadn't he told her? The door opened around midnight. Hyun-woo came in looking exhausted, his tie loosened, jacket over one arm. Hi, he said, brightening when he saw her. You waited up. I'm sorry I'm so late, the library. Who are you? The words came out flat. That. He froze. What? Oh, are you? She stood, pulling up the article on her phone, holding it out. Is this you? The color drained from his face. I can explain. And that's when she'd thrown her wine glass. When the world had cracked open, revealing the lie underneath. Now, sitting on her bathroom floor, Miriam pressed her hands against her stomach and tried not to scream. Her phone buzzed with texts from Hyun-woo. Please let me explain. I never meant to hurt you. What we have is real. Please, Miriam. She turned off her phone. For 3 days she avoided him. Left early for work, came home late, locked herself in her room. She heard him moving around the flat, heard him pause outside her door but never knock. The morning sickness was getting worse. She called in sick to work, spent the day curled on her bed trying to figure out what to do. A knock on her door. Miriam? I made soup. I'm leaving it outside your door. She waited until his footsteps retreated, then retrieved the container. It was her favorite, the mayakguk he'd made when she'd had a cold last month. Despite everything, it made her want to cry. That evening, Andrea showed up with wine, took one look at Miriam's face and set the bottle down. Okay. Talk. I'm pregnant. Andrea's eyes went wide. How long have you known? Since the day I found out about him. About who he really is. Miriam laughed bitterly. Perfect timing, right? Does he know? No. And I'm not telling him. He'll think, her voice broke. He'll think I'm trying to trap him. One of those women who gets pregnant to snare a rich man. That's ridiculous. You didn't even know he was rich. He doesn't know that. Then tell him. Andrea grabbed her hands. Babe, you have to talk to him. Even if you don't stay together, he has a right to know about his kid. I can't. Every time I look at him, all I see is the lies. Or you could see a man who fell in love with you. Who's been miserable for 3 days because he hurt you. Andrea's voice gentled. I'm not saying forgive him immediately. But hear him out. Let him explain. Miriam nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I'm scared, Andrea. What if this ruins everything? What if it doesn't? That night, Miriam emerged from her room. Hyun-woo was at the kitchen table, laptop open but not working, just staring at nothing. He looked up when she entered, and the hope in his eyes nearly undid her. Can we talk? She asked. Please. They sat across from each other, the table a barrier and a bridge. I should have told you from the beginning, Hyun-woo said. I know that. I was selfish and cowardly and I'm so sorry. Why didn't you? Because. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture achingly familiar. Because in Korea, I'm not a person. I'm Kim Hyun-woo, heir to Daehan Group. Every relationship, every friendship, every interaction is colored by that. People want things from me, money, connections, status. I never know what's real. So you lied to me instead? I didn't lie. I just omitted. He winced. Which I know isn't much better. But Miriam, everything else was real. My feelings for you, our relationship, the person I am with you, That's the truest version of myself I've ever been. How am I supposed to trust that? How do I know this isn't all some elaborate game? Because I love you. The words burst from him raw and desperate. I love you in a way I didn't know I could love anyone. You see me, not my money, not my family name, not what I can do for you. Just me. And that's more precious than anything else in my life. Miriam's throat tightened. You should have told me. I know. I feel like I don't know you at all. Then let me show you. He reached across the table, stopping just short of her hands. Ask me anything. I'll tell you everything. No more secrets. She studied him. This man she'd fallen for, this stranger, this liar, this person she somehow still loved despite everything. Your family. Tell me about them. He took a breath. My father is Kim Dae-young. He built Daehan Group from nothing. Shipping, then manufacturing, then technology. It's now worth about $30 billion. I'm the only son, which means I'm expected to take over when he retires. And your mother? Pain flashed across his face. She died when I was 16. Cancer. She was the only one who saw me as more than the heir. After she died, I lost the only person who loved me for who I was. I'm so sorry. My father remarried within a year. A woman half his age who saw me as competition for his fortune. His laugh was bitter. I left for London to escape them, to figure out if I wanted the life they'd planned for me. I enrolled at LSE using my mother's maiden name. Started fresh. And then you answered my rental ad. Best decision I ever made. His eyes held hers. I meant to tell you. So many times. But every day that passed made it harder, and I was terrified, absolutely terrified, that if you knew the truth you'd look at me differently. That I'd lose you. You almost did anyway. I know. Miriam pressed her palms flat on the table, gathering courage. There's something I need to tell you. Anything. I'm pregnant. The silence was absolute. Hyunwoo's face went through a dozen expressions, shock, confusion, hope, fear, before settling on something that looked like wonder. We're. He stood abruptly, rounded the table, dropped to his knees beside her chair. You're having my baby? I found out the same day I learned about you. About your family. She couldn't look at him. I understand if you think I'm trying to trap you or... Stop. He took her hands, his grip almost painful. Stop. That's not... Miriam, look at me. She forced herself to meet his eyes. I don't think that. I could never think that. His voice shook. You're having my baby. We're going to have a family. We don't have to, she said quickly. I'm not asking you for anything. If you want to go back to Korea to your life, I won't. No. The word was absolute. No. I'm not going anywhere. Hyunwoo. Marry me. She stared at him. What? Marry me. He squeezed her hands. I know this is fast, I know we have things to work through, but Miriam, I love you. I want to be with you, build a life with you, raise our child together. Marry me. You're insane. We just had a massive fight. I'm still angry at you. Be angry at me as my wife. Despite everything, she laughed. That's your proposal? I'll do it properly later. With a ring on my knees, proper knees, not kitchen floor knees. I'll make it romantic and perfect. His smile was crooked. But right now, I just need to know, will you give me another chance? Will you let me prove that I'm worthy of you and our baby? Miriam looked at him, this impossible man, this billionaire heir on his knees in her shabby kitchen, looking at her like she hung the moon. She thought about the past weeks, the happiness she'd felt, the connection they'd built. She thought about the life growing inside her. One condition, she said. Anything. No more secrets. About anything. If I'm going to do this, I need complete honesty. I swear it. Complete honesty always. He kissed her hands. Does that mean yes? It means we'll see. After you do that proper proposal you mentioned. His smile could have lit London. I'll make it perfect. I promise. 3 days later, Hyunwoo woke her before dawn. Get dressed, he said. Something warm. We're going on a trip. It's 5 in the morning. I know. Trust me? She did. Despite everything she did. He drove them out of London in a car that made her choke. A sleek black Porsche she'd never seen before. Where did this come from? I've been keeping it in a garage. I didn't want to explain why a struggling student had a 90,000 pounds car. He shot her a rueful look. No more secrets, remember? They drove north for 2 hours, finally stopping at a cliff overlooking the sea. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It's beautiful, Miriam breathed. My mother loved the ocean, Hyunwoo said softly. She always said sunrise was when the world made promises. He led her to the cliff edge, where he'd somehow set up a blanket and picnic basket. When did you? I have people. At her look he added, I'll explain that later. Right now, he took both her hands and she realized he was shaking. Miriam Cornwall. From the moment you opened your door to me, my life changed. You gave me shelter when I needed escape. You gave me friendship when I needed connection. You gave me love when I didn't think I deserved it. He pulled out a box, black velvet, clearly expensive. Inside was a ring that made her gasp, a perfect solitaire diamond, surrounded by smaller stones that caught the dawn light. This was my mother's, he said. The only thing of hers I kept. I'd like you to have it if you'll have me. He dropped to one knee. Miriam, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you? Tears streamed down her face. You already are worthy. You always were. Is that a yes? Yes. God, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, a perfect fit, and kissed her as the sun rose over the ocean, sealing promises as old as time. But reality, as always, was more complicated than romance. You want to what? Andrea shrieked. Marry him, Miriam repeated, holding up her hand to show the ring. We're engaged. Babe, I love you. But you were furious at him 3 days ago. I still am. A little. But Andrea, she pressed her hand to her stomach. We're having a baby. And I love him. Really love him. Not because of his money or his family, but because of who he is. Who he is with me. Andrea studied her for a long moment, then sighed. You're sure? Really sure? More sure than I've ever been. Then I'm happy for you. She pulled Miriam into a hug. But if he ever hurts you again, I'm flying to Korea and fighting his entire family. Deal. The real challenge was telling Hyunwoo's father. He doesn't know I'm in London, Hyunwoo admitted as they prepared for the video call. He thinks I'm in New York on business. So we're about to give him several heart attacks at once. Probably. He squeezed her hand. Ready? Kim Dae-young was intimidating even through a screen, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with Hyunwoo's bone structure but none of his warmth. The conversation was in Korean, rapid and heated. Miriam couldn't understand the words, but she didn't need to. The father's anger was clear, his gestures sharp and dismissive. Hyunwoo kept his voice level, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Finally he switched to English. Father, this is Miriam Cornwall. My fiancée. The older man's eyes swiveled to her, assessment instant and cold. Miss Cornwall, he said in perfect English. Do you know who my son is? I do now, yes. And you're pregnant with his child? I am. How convenient for you. Miriam felt her spine stiffen. Excuse me? Father, Hyunwoo warned. It's a classic scheme, Kim Dae-young continued. Get pregnant by a wealthy man, secure your future. Very practical. That's enough, Hyunwoo said sharply. But Miriam was already speaking, her voice cold. Mr. Kim, I didn't know your son was wealthy when I got pregnant. I didn't know when I fell in love with him. I met him when he was pretending to be a struggling student, living in my spare room because I needed help with rent. Whatever you think of me, I didn't choose him for his money. Then what did you choose him for? Because he makes me laugh. Because he cooks me dinner and listens to my problems and sees me as more than a problem to be solved. She leaned forward. Because he's kind and thoughtful and makes me want to be better. That's why I love him. Not because of anything you've built. Silence. Kim Dae-young stared at her, something shifting in his expression. You truly didn't know? Not until 3 days ago. He was quiet for a long moment, then said something in Korean to Hyunwoo. His son responded, his tone firm, and they exchanged several more rapid sentences. Finally, Kim Dae-young turned back to Miriam. My son says you are the best thing that has ever happened to him. That he will not return to Korea unless you are with him. That's correct, Hyunwoo confirmed. And you? He addressed Miriam. What do you want? I want to build a life with your son. Here or in Korea, I don't care. As long as we're together. Another long pause. Then, very well. I will arrange for you both to visit Seoul. It is time you met the family properly, Miss Cornwall. And we must plan a wedding worthy of the Kim name. After the call ended, Miriam sagged against Hyunwoo. That was terrifying. You were magnificent. He kissed her temple. He liked you. That's why he fought back. He only bothers arguing with people he respects. Does he? Trust me. If he didn't, the conversation would have been much shorter. He turned her to face him. How do you feel about going to Seoul? Terrified. Excited. Nauseous, but that might be the pregnancy. We don't have to go if you don't want to. No, she considered. I want to see your world. Understand where you come from. Besides, if we're doing this, I should probably meet the in-laws properly. You're incredible. You know that. I'm aware, she teased. Now tell me, what exactly does a wedding worthy of the Kim name mean? His expression was somewhere between pride and apology. It means hundreds of guests, couture gowns, probably several ceremonies, and media coverage that will make royal weddings look understated. Oh God. We can do it smaller if you want. I'll fight him on it. No, Miriam said slowly. No, if we're doing this, let's do it right. Your way and my way. A big wedding in Seoul for your family, and a small ceremony here for mine. You do that. For you? Yes. She kissed him. But I'm choosing my own dress. And Andrea is my maid of honor. Non-negotiable. Deal. Seoul in winter was beautiful and overwhelming. Hyunwoo had warned her, but nothing could have prepared Miriam for the reality. The Kim family estate was essentially a palace. Modern architecture blended with traditional Korean elements, sprawling grounds, staff who bowed and spoke in whispers. This is where you grew up? She asked, stunned. I know. It's too much. He squeezed her hand. But this isn't me anymore. You know that, right? The person I am with you, that's who I want to be. She believed him. But it was still overwhelming. The family dinner that first night was an exercise in diplomacy. Hyunwoo's father was coolly polite. His stepmother, a woman Miriam's age named Jiwon, was hostile, her smile sharp as knives. So, Jiwon said in perfect English, you're a social worker? How humble. It's rewarding work, Miriam replied evenly. I'm sure. And now you'll be so much more comfortable, won't you? Marrying into wealth. Jiwon, Hyunwoo said warningly. What? I'm simply observing that she's landed very comfortably for someone who supposedly didn't know what she was getting into. That's enough, Kim Dae-young said quietly. But there was steel in his voice. Jiwon subsided, but her eyes promised future battles. After dinner, Hyunwoo found Miriam on the terrace, staring out at the Seoul skyline. I'm sorry about Jiwon, he said. She's threatened by me. I get it. Miriam turned to him. Hyunwoo, I need to ask, are you sure about this? Really sure? Because this world, your world, it's so different from mine. What if I can't fit into it? You don't have to fit into it. We're making our own world. He pulled her close. Besides, my mother would have loved you. She'd have appreciated someone who challenges me, who doesn't just bow to the family name. Tell me about her? So he did. They sat on the terrace for hours, Hyunwoo sharing memories of his mother, her kindness, her strength, her quiet rebellion against the rigid structures of Korean elite society. How she taught him to cook, to value people over profit, to question what he was told. She sounds wonderful, Miriam said softly. She was. And she'd be so happy about the baby. He placed his hand over her stomach. About all of this. The wedding planning was a whirlwind. Designers flew in from Milan and Paris, presenting couture options that made Miriam's head spin. She finally chose a Vera Wang gown, elegant, simple, with delicate lace that reminded her of her mother's wedding dress. You look like a princess, Andrea said over video call, seeing the photos. I feel like an imposter. You're not. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Miriam wished she felt as certain. The traditional Korean ceremony was first, held at a historic palace, with hundreds of guests dressed in elaborate hanboks. Miriam wore a traditional Korean wedding dress, her hair arranged in an elaborate style that took hours. She barely recognized herself in the mirror. Beautiful, Hyunwoo breathed when he saw her. He wore traditional groom's attire, looking every inch the prince he'd been raised to be. The ceremony was in Korean, and Miriam understood little of it. But she understood the look in Hyunwoo's eyes as he took her hands, the tears on his father's face, the way the crowd whispered approval. She was marrying into this family, this legacy, this world. Terrifying. Exhilarating. The reception was equally elaborate. Hundreds of guests, Korean and international, politicians and celebrities and business leaders. Miriam smiled until her face hurt, made conversation in 3 languages, tried not to feel like a fraud. You're doing wonderfully, Kim Dae-young told her during the father-daughter dance. He'd insisted on taking her father's place. My son chose well. I hope so. I know so. His expression softened. I was harsh when we first spoke. I've seen too many fortune hunters, too many people who wanted to use my son. But you see him. The real him. That's rare. Precious. He's easy to love. He is now. He wasn't always. The older man smiled. You've changed him. Made him happy in a way he hasn't been since his mother died. For that, you have my gratitude. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. The London ceremony 2 weeks later was everything the Seoul wedding wasn't. Small, intimate, held in a tiny church near Miriam's childhood home. Only close friends and family, simple decorations, homemade cake. Miriam wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit with her mother's pearls. Andrea was her maid of honor, crying through the entire ceremony. "I, Miriam Cornwall, take you Hyunwoo Kim," she said, tears streaming down her face. "To be my partner, my love, my home. In wealth and in poverty, in joy and in sorrow, in truth and in trust. Forever." "Forever," he echoed, sliding the ring onto her finger. This ceremony was in English, full of laughter and tears, feeling more real than all the grandeur in Seoul. This was their truth, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds, choosing to build a life together. "You may kiss the bride," the minister said. Hyunwoo cradled her face, kissing her with a tenderness that made her melt. "Hello, Mrs. Kim," he murmured against her lips. "Hello, Mr. Cornwall Kim," she corrected. "We're hyphenating, remember?" "Hyphenating. Right." He grinned. "My father nearly had a heart attack." "Good. Keeps him humble." At the reception, held in their flat, intimate and chaotic, Andrea made a toast that had everyone crying. "To Miriam and Hyunwoo," she said, raising her glass, "who proved that sometimes the best things in life come from taking a chance on a stranger." Miriam woke to sunlight streaming through the windows of their new home, a compromise between their two worlds, a townhouse in Kensington that was elegant without being ostentatious. Hyunwoo was already awake, his hand resting on her very pregnant stomach. "Good morning," he murmured, kissing her shoulder. "Morning." She placed her hand over his, feeling their daughter kick. "She's active today. Takes after her mother. They'd found out the gender last month, a girl." Hyunwoo had cried. "We still haven't decided on a name," Miriam said. "I was thinking, Eleanor, after your mother, but with a Korean middle name. Eleanor Jihai Cornwall Kim." Miriam tested it out. "I love it." Yeah. They lay there for a while, wrapped in each other in the quiet morning light. So much had changed in the past year. Miriam had cut back her hours at work, not because Hyunwoo asked but because she wanted time to prepare for motherhood, to adjust to her new life. Hyunwoo had returned to Daehan Group, but on his own terms. He worked in their charitable foundation now, using his business acumen to fund social programs like the ones Miriam had worked for. They'd become partners in more ways than one. "Andrea's coming for dinner tonight," Miriam reminded him. "And your father is visiting next week." "I remember." He kissed her stomach. "Hear that, Eleanor? Your Auntie Andrea and Grandfather Dae-young are coming to spoil you. She's not even born yet. Never too early to start." Miriam laughed, then gasped as a particularly strong kick hit her ribs. "She's going to be a handful. She'll be perfect. Like her mother. Flatterer. Realist." He moved up to kiss her properly. "I love you. Both of you. All of us. I love you too." It hadn't been easy merging their worlds. There were still moments when Miriam felt out of place at charity galas or family dinners. Still times when Hyunwoo struggled with the expectations placed on him. Still conflicts between their different backgrounds and assumptions. But they worked through it. Together. Because that was the truth they'd learned. Love wasn't about perfect circumstances or fairy tale endings. It was about choosing each other, every day despite the complications. About building something real out of unlikely beginnings. About taking a chance on a stranger and finding your home. "Come on," Hyunwoo said, carefully helping her sit up. "I'll make you breakfast. And we can argue about whether Eleanor should have a Korean name too. She's already hyphenated. Let's not give her 3 names. 4. We need to honor both grandmothers." "Hyunwoo. Eleanor Jihai Margaret Cornwall Kim. It has a ring to it." "That's insane." "But you're considering it." She was. God help her, she was. They made their way to the kitchen together, Hyunwoo supporting her awkward waddle, both laughing at the absurdity of it all. Outside, London hummed with life. Somewhere in Seoul, Hyunwoo's father was probably already at work. In a small flat in Brixton, Andrea was likely still asleep after a night shift. And here, in their kitchen, a billionaire heir made breakfast for his social worker wife, their daughter kicking between them, their future spreading out like a promise. It wasn't the story either of them had expected. But it was theirs. And that made it perfect. 5 years later, Eleanor Jihai Margaret Cornwall Kim would start kindergarten at a public school in London, despite her grandfather's protests. She would be joined 2 years later by her brother, James Hyunwoo Cornwall Kim. Miriam would return to social work part-time, while Hyunwoo would expand the Daehan Foundation to operate in 12 countries. They would split their time between London and Seoul, raising their children to understand both worlds, to value people over possessions, to know that love, real love, could bridge any distance, any difference, any divide. And on quiet mornings when the children were still asleep and the world was just waking up, they would sit together and remember how a broken woman and a hiding prince had found each other in a shabby Brixton flat, and built something extraordinary from that first unlikely meeting. How sometimes the best love stories start with taking a chance on a stranger. How home isn't a place but a person. How they'd found that in each other. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy our stories, you can join our membership by clicking on the link in this video description box.